Hi, I've never done this before, but I had a pretty profound day yesterday, an experience, and I had an interesting evening and morning, and I wrote a lot, and I thought about sharing it in written form as I typically do, and I decided that I'm going to read it, and I'm going to pray that I can get through it. But there's a reason and a prayer and an intention for sharing, so I'm going to. I'm not just going to speak, I'm actually going to try and read. PTSD. Wow. The statistics show that special need parents show as higher rates of PTSD as soldiers who return from war. And I certainly was struck with my own yesterday. We moved over a year ago now, and I have settled into such a relaxed state that I was caught extremely off guard in the benign environment with Marielle and the actual panic that rose in me. The intense need and desire that I felt to grab her and literally run, to protect her, to guard her, to shield her from all that I neglected to protect, guard, and shield Jack from. See, my PTSD isn't as much about the physical, although I do have that. It's not so much about the food and the medications, the interventions, the Western medical pieces that were in place, although we did do all of it very differently with Marielle. My PTSD is really around more of the developmental expectation of children. It's more around the loss of seeing a child as a child. The therapeutic aspect we experienced with Jack he was seen as a diagnosis needing to be modified, changed, shifted, fixed. He was not really seen as the perfect little 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. little boy that he was. I was told over and over, this is best practice. This is what will help him be successful. This is what you need to do for him now. If you don't do it for him now, he's going to suffer some severe consequences. For all intent and purposes, what they were really saying to me is, we know and you don't. September 2013, Jack had just turned 5, and we took him to Surfers Healing in Narragansett, which is a beautiful organization, and I'm not knocking any of the magnificent, amazing things that they've done all over the world, but it's really important for me to tell this story because it illustrates exactly what's going on for me right now. It was a cloudy day, it was cold, and it was very stormy, and the waves were intense, and Jack had just turned 5, and he loved the water and was a great swimmer, but he had never been on a surfboard before, and he had never been in swells like that. I was very clear to the ocean coordinator, who was in the water with the surfers, as well as the surfer, that if Jack seemed to be upset at all, it was time for him to turn around and come in. From the shore, I watched him completely panic. He screamed, he thrashed, he yelled, he went ballistic. Without thinking, I dove right in, and 3 men a foot taller than me were screaming in my face while I was treading water in very strong seas. That he was not coming in. He was paddling out and he was going to surf in just like the rest of the kids. And that I needed to get out of the water. They argued with me while my son was having a panic attack on a surfboard in really large swells. Within a split second, I heard my father's booming voice next to me yelling, "Give my daughter her son now." He was fully clothed in jeans, a sweater, iPhone in his pocket, but he didn't hesitate or think. He was at my side, protecting me as I was in the water protecting my son. The men came over to me later to explain their methodology and that kids on the spectrum may panic, but they have to push through and they need to come surfing in with a smile at the end. I decided not to argue with them. I simply explained exactly what my mother had been saying, and that it was trauma. Just because a child has a diagnosis doesn't mean that the parents' intuitions and knowledge about their children, especially their own children, are null and void. For 9 years, I've had those experiences over and over and over in all sorts of different situations. I have been advocate. I have been combative. The damage that has been left is real. But until yesterday, I had forgotten it. I'm not complaining. I asked for this. All of it. All of it. I welcome it. My son came with such a strong mission and such profound lessons to teach. There are countless people watching this now, endless people watching this now, all over the world, that could tell you that Jack has changed something in their life. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being arrogant about it. I'm just being honest. The most profound lesson he has had, though, is on how I choose to parent his little sister. I'd love to say that our journey was one of clarity from day one. Although I know I came in this way, intuitive, marching to my own drum, connected and loving God, extremely spiritual in every way. I chose to major in and study theology as an 18-year-old in college. Stephen and I did not choose the life that we're living right now with ease and flow. Stephen and I had to experience the injuries of our boy to make our conscious choices outside of the norm, outside of the mainstream. It needed to be presented in such an extreme way for us to make different choices. I don't know why. I don't know why. But God does, and quite frankly, I'm okay with that. It's good enough for me. It's our path. I am certainly paying attention, and I wasn't going to let all that Jack sacrificed be for naught. I knew that the external influences that allowed to permeate my sacred bond of mother to son would not be allowed to be breached again, and with either of my children ever. When Marielle was 4, she was getting frustrated with her ability to draw. She couldn't make curly hair on her stick figures the way her friends could, and it was getting very upsetting to her. I knew Jack's wonderful OT would be able to support and guide her with ease, and I reached out to her. Since it would be through the school district, there were lots of forms, many people involved, there were evaluations, there were visits on other aspects of her development, and when I received paperwork home to have her farm school teachers fill out extensive questions about her behavior, her language, her skills, and that we should look into a diagnosis, and that paperwork would be filed with the state of Massachusetts, I lost my mind. By the grace of God, I had an incredible relationship at that time with his OT, with Jack's OT, and one of Jack's specialists who talked me off of the ledge, respectfully assured me that they knew I knew what I was doing. Marielle would get the fine motor support she needed over the course of that year and was writing and drawing beautifully within months, but most importantly, it was done with such appropriate love and developmentally appropriate skills that she just blossomed in the joy of using her hands to create. When we arrived in Florida at Mangrove last year, I mentioned her fine motor struggle a few months into her kindergarten year, and her teacher told me she saw none of that. Zero. No struggle at all. I will lose my way. I will fuck up. I will ask for grace and for guidance and for forgiveness and for clarity every day from God. But through this all, I also know that there's so much that I have listened to and I have done well. I forgot yesterday the anguish of so much of what I have endured. What I experienced because of the complete lack of triggers around us this last year, it took me by such surprise. The vigilance and high alert has ceased. The moment yesterday was not extraordinary. It was not threatening. It was not menacing, but it triggered me nonetheless. And I'm so grateful I was there with such a special friend that could remind me, but you're not an anxious person. What's going on? And she's so right. I'm really the furthest from it. But something happened in me yesterday, and the introspection and clarity I see, there are survival codes ready to actually be healed, to be thanked, to be blessed, and to be released. They've held me well, and they've provided me purpose. But I can make peace now. To be a bit graphic, I ate after this experience yesterday, and I actually threw up every single bite. I got in bed, and when the kids were asleep, I shared with Stephen what had happened and my thoughts around it. Very atypical for me. Thank you, Venus retrograde, for creating a new pattern. But the words weren't even all the way out of my mouth, and he completely understood all of it. In the very depth of his being, he knew exactly what I was talking about. And he said to me, "This is why you threw up. You needed to purge." And he told me the irony is that you were having this experience when I was with Jack at his friend's birthday party, and I was so amazed at the fun time he had for over 2.5 hours with his friends, playing, sitting on the swing set, going on the trampoline, following along with all the kids, dressing up in costumes. It was a Halloween theme. He said he absolutely loved it, and he was so independent. And I exhaled and I replied, yes. That's been the beauty of us forging a new path. Now it's time to heal the remaining wounds. Mine. Not Jack's, not Marielle's, mine. I had an interesting night's sleep and then a really lovely conversation with my mom today, who reminded me of times that I stood up and did right by Jack, that I was his voice, that I did protect him. There's actually so many of them, but it's truly the battle scars that are left that need to be addressed. My hope and prayer and intention in sending this forth is that if one person hears the message that these wounds that lie within don't need to remain, we have the power to ask and receive healing. If one parent is offered the courage to change against all external forces, all that they thought they knew, and begin again. And if we as a collective can start to see the ripple effects of the trauma damage we are creating in the family unit by stepping forth and disconnecting the parental intuition from their child, then sharing today has so much value for me. I wrote in my journal this morning, and on the very first page from yesterday was the scripture from Isaiah 61. Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. there's always a new day, and there's always new hope.